Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to today's vlog. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome. My name is Mike, but I write historical fiction under the pen name of Eli Kale. And right now I'll be talking about a bit of my writing process. Right now I'm doing a 15-part series on it. And today's video is going to be talking about revising your rough draft. So in the last video I talked a little bit about writing your rough draft and editing as you go. The big reason behind editing as you go is just little things, keep in mind. The reason behind it is so that you can save yourself time down the road when the big editing comes. If you catch typos or grammatical errors or comma placement, things like that, little things that can add up over time. If you knock those out as you write, then you'll save yourself a little bit of work later, and it helps you reread what you have written, and that way you can catch flow. Then after that, I talked about the importance of giving your eyes and your mind a break. Once you finish writing your first draft and you edit as you go, give yourself anywhere from a couple of days to a couple of weeks even to just take a break from the text that you've been seeing for countless hours or days or however long it is that you write. Some people even say that it's good to take even up to a month or two off. That just comes down to preference. I don't want to take that much time off just because I want to get my content out there. But if you're going to want to try that, it's just going to be trial and error. So now that you've taken a break from your text, it's time to start the revision process. The best way, in my opinion, to do this is to start from the beginning. That way you can read through as the reader would read it, and that way you can kind of catch the different details that form your story, the plot line, and the arc of your story. Some authors, they might prefer to tackle specific sections of their book because it's an important section or something's been on their mind about it and they want to tend to that first. That may work for some, it may not work for others. Again, it just comes down to trial and error. Like I said, reading it from the beginning, it really helps you to identify the little details as you go along that really build up the plot in the reader's eyes, and you can more easily identify different things, like if you're spending too much time describing one character more than another, or if something's missing from as like a setting description or something else that's important like that. Especially in the beginning, if it's foundational to understand something later in the story, it's best to start from the beginning and go from there for reasons like that. As you're reading along, if you decide to make any changes in your story, try to keep those changes to a small degree. You don't want to make too many big changes just because I mentioned in the videos before that if you change something, it may affect other things, and if it's large enough, you'll have to change a lot of other things to accommodate for that. And that can take time out of your writing, and it can extend the publication date, which most writers don't want to do. So this first revision should be focused on moving the plot along, and again, keeping the changes and the amendments to a minimum. I talk in the next video about making your second revision, your second read through, making that more in depth, but I'll get to that later. Also in the last video I mentioned the importance of reading your text out loud. Doing this, you can hear the way that the words sound, and it can also give you an opportunity to pick out maybe some misspelled words or different typos like that you wouldn't necessarily pick up reading quietly to yourself. And also by doing this, it allows you to feel the flow of the sentence or the cadence of the sentence, which leads me into what I want to talk about today a little bit. When I mention the word cadence, I'm talking about the flow of a sentence and the speed at which a reader reads the sentence. It's good to not always have short sentences, and it's also good not always to have long sentences. You want to have a good mix of them, and it just depends on what's going on in the story that will determine what length of sentence you should have at any given time. Usually when something important is happening in the story and you want the reader to focus on that, you probably don't want to have a lot of long sentences strung together just because they get caught up in reading the sentences and making sure they're getting everything in and not focusing so much on what's actually happening in the story. So in instances like that, you might want to have shorter sentences that are succinct and get right to the point. I've got to get this a second. Sibling love. Anyway, the catch to having short sentences sometimes is that because the way our mind works, when we read, we look, at least I do, we look ahead in the sentence to see what's coming up next, but we're still reading the words behind where we're looking. It's a weird phenomenon if you've ever read into it or looked into it, but what happens with short sentences is that because we know that the end of the sentence is coming up, and if there are a lot of short sentences back to back to back to back, sometimes what we tend to do is just zip through the sentences and not really pay too much attention to what's actually being stated in those sentences. So if you're trying to say something important with short sentences, sometimes that might be costly. It just depends, again, trial and error. Something that goes hand in hand with sentence structure and the cadence and flow of your sentences is paragraph structure. Now, most of us were brought up on the notion that a paragraph should consist of anywhere from 5 to 7 sentences. I've heard even as low as 3 is acceptable, anywhere as high as 9. I think that's a little extreme, but again, it just depends on what's going on in the story. A lot of times what I do, I try to abide by that, but I let the story dictate it. You know, if I'm introducing a new character, or if I'm giving some details about a setting or a character or something, I'll usually just kind of try to get it down to within 3 or 4 sentences, and I'll put that in after, you know, if the character says his first line of dialogue or something like that, I'll put it in with that. That way the reader can attach to that character, find out a little bit about them, but they're not drowned out by 9 sentences of exposition. And then I can get on with the next paragraph. A good use for smaller paragraphs with, you know, say maybe 3 or 4 sentences is bridging the gap between different parts of your story, or, you know, connecting characters, settings, whatever it is. You know, that way on the page, especially if it's printed, because, you know, with ebooks it's harder to tell, but if it's printed, you can see that there's a lot of material, a lot of content higher on the page, then there's a smaller paragraph, and then there's the rest of the page. It may seem kind of weird to think about, but having paragraphs of varying sizes really helps the reader move along through the story. And especially, like I just said, if you look ahead and you see a lot of bigger paragraphs, mentally that's an obstacle for us in our minds. You know, if we see a lot of heavy-duty paragraphs coming up, and especially if it's toward the end of the night, or you go into class, or your lunch break's over or something, and you think, okay, well, I gotta end somewhere, I'll just stop reading here. And the overall objective as an author is to keep your readers reading your story and not having to stop. So it's good to break up bigger paragraphs with smaller ones. And just a quick word on plot. You should always, whenever you're writing a story, you should always have a question in mind that the reader wants answered. That's the point of reading a story, is because as the plot moves along, as the story develops, the reader gets closer and closer to getting that question answered. But not everyone will have the same question at the outset of the story. And that's the beauty of the nature of storytelling, is that because everybody is different and they perceive what a story means as they begin reading it and as they continue through, that means that there are different angles to the story's answer, or what you're trying to give to the reader at the end, so that they can say, ah, that was a good story. So basically, it's important to keep in mind where you want the story to go and where it should go with regard to the reader's questions, and just be mindful of that and work toward that ending. So to end today's vlog, I'd like to briefly talk about a resource that I use, and it's called thebookdesigner.com. It's run by a guy named Joel Friedlander, who is a blogger, author, and a self-publishing authority. You can find out a lot about him and what he does on his website, and you can also see there a vast array of articles that have been written, guest posts that have been made with him, and just a lot of great resources for authors and self-pubs. And you can also consult with him if you're looking to get your project off the ground. I've read quite a few articles on his website, and I can tell you that they've definitely helped me become a better writer and just to be more aware and more knowledgeable about the craft. So check out Joel Friedlander and thebookdesigner.com and let me know what you think. So thanks for watching today's video, guys. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If this is your first time watching and you're not a subscriber yet, please hit that subscribe button. And check out my website for all the things I'm working on and different things that will be coming up in the near future at EliKaleAuthor.com. One of which is the GoFundMe campaign for the National World War II Museum down in Louisiana. I still have yet to get any of your donations for that. So as an incentive, I'm going to give the first few donors a free ebook copy of any of my books, and we'll see how it goes from there. Also, I'll have that information in the description, but also in April, this next month, I'll be going to the Dayton Book Expo, and I'm looking forward to it. It'll be the first big writing related event that I'll be going to, and I'll be looking to see if I can network with some other authors and fellow readers and make it a good time. So thanks for watching again, guys, and I'll see you next week.